Welcome to another episode of the Core Podcast, where we will be delving into the world of cybersecurity and exploring the critical role of diversity and women playing and shaping the future of this dynamic field and also the industry that we are all trying to play a part in. I'm your host, Kelly, and today's episode we're unraveling the layers of importance surrounding diversity and women in cybersecurity with two fantastic guests. I hope you enjoy. Thank you both for joining me today on the podcast. This is the Core Podcast. I'm really grateful for both of you joining us, especially as it's been a bit of a circle of how you've made it here. You met my colleague Olivia when you were at an event together. So for anyone that's new to our podcast, would you mind just doing a brief introduction, a bit of your history? Elsa, if we start with you, would that be okay?
Yeah, that would be perfectly fine. I'm Elsa. I work as a security analyst for an Austrian-based company called NTS, and I'm currently doing my master's studies in cybersecurity, also in Austria, in St. Pölten. And before that, I'm born and raised in Kosovo, and that's where I did my my bachelor's, and that's where I initially got introduced to cybersecurity through a company there called Cyber Academy, which kind of provides year-long trainings in cybersecurity. And that is how I kind of got into these waters and got involved with cybersecurity.
So as a child, is that what you dreamed to be when you grew up? Was that what you pinned on your wall or studied at school? Because that's not where I thought I would end up. So how did that happen, and what was your childhood like that made you get to where you are?
Well, as a child, I mean, I think that's kind of like a shared dream. I kind of wanted to be an astronaut, so that nothing
okay.
to do.
That's a good dream.
With cybersecurity, yeah. And I think as you grow older, you kind of get more tangible dreams, so to say.
Mm-hmm.
But it was my high school that actually shaped me into this direction, because my profile in high school was math, and we did a lot of programming. So most of everybody there was kind of leaning towards programming, so computer science or computer engineering. And I think half of my class went to computer engineering. We kind of all picked the same degree. And last year of studies or so, we partook in a CTF as representing the university. And that was my absolute first time seeing anything. So I'd read about these cool hacker stories in books and all of that, but it just seemed very unreachable. And it seemed like you had to be had to have some kind of God-given power or so. And 2 weeks in before that event, we kind of taught each other. So we would go in and look different sorts of attacks, and then we would try them out, and then we would teach them to each other. And then we partook in this event, and I was mind blown. And then I was like, okay, this is what I want to do apparently.
So you said that you did maths at school, and you were doing programming then. At that point, was it quite equal split gender-wise? Or did you find that you were a minority in your class? Because I know in the UK, not many of us, girls definitely, don't continue to do maths or science generally when they kind of hit the teenage age. So did you find that, or in your country, do girls carry on doing maths?
Actually, my class was pretty equal split.
Okay.
And I think grade-wise, so in terms of being graded, girls did better, because you just were a bit more committed, I would say.
Interesting.
And as we went to uni, there was, I think at the time it was a 60-40 percentage. I'm not entirely sure what our percentage was at the time, but I've been keeping an eye on what the technical university has been doing in terms of computer engineering. And because of some steps they took in the past to kind of ensure equality, now the number by default goes 50-50.
Okay,
and
good.
so that's been turning out pretty great for them.
Should you want to tell us a bit of your story and how you're sat here today and in the world of cybersecurity? Did you have that on your dream board as a child?
Yeah, thank you. First of all, allow me to express my gratitude to you, Kelly, and the team. So my name is Danusha, as you stated yourself, and I specialize in IT and cybersecurity. And in addition to this professional expertise, I currently have the role as founder and president of Women for Cyber Kosovo. And through this role, I lead initiatives focused on promoting gender diversity and empowerment within the field of cybersecurity. Today, especially, I'm very thrilled and excited because I'm going to be talking about two topics which I keep very close to my heart: cybersecurity and women inclusion in the field. If we're speaking about my childhood, I've been born and raised in Pristina, capital city of Kosovo. And growing up, I had the opportunity to spend a tiny fraction of my childhood with the presence of internet and technology. And although this fraction was very small, I enjoyed the wonders of internet and technology by playing virtual games or by exploring different virtual landscapes. So pretty much ever since I was a kid, I kind of dreamed that I will develop myself in the field of technology. Although I did not know that I will end up in cybersecurity, I kind of believed and hoped that when I grow up, I will have a role in the technology field. And that's why I embarked my journey. And with the support of my family, I continued my studies, and I was also part of Cyber Academy. That's when I first touched the subject of cybersecurity. And from there on, I just continued.
I mean, that's pretty impressive that you knew pretty early on, and it seems that you both had quite a clear direction and path of what you wanted to do and access to resources. It seems that maybe here we're a bit slower and behind, because when I was at university, and maybe there was, but I don't remember barely anyone in my year doing computer science, let alone talk about cybersecurity. And it's only really been since my adult career and now working where I do that it's been. So it feels like you guys have had some really good stepping stones to get to where you are, or the right education at the right time, the right family support. You're both pretty trailblazing in where you are in your careers. So I wondered if we could just shine a bit of spotlight on your careers and what you've done there and some stories. And has it been straightforward as women going out of university into a career? Have you found was it as straightforward, or was there any challenges or things that came along the way? I don't mind, Liza, if you wanted to start with your story from after leaving school.
I mean, school itself was a bit interesting at occasions, because
Okay.
although they had although there was a lot of like initiatives to make sure that there's inclusion, there were people that still had a bit of more of a backwards mindset.
Okay.
And so, like, I remember one conversation I had with some friends at uni where I was trying to buy a new laptop, and we were talking about what kind of resources I wanted to have. And there was a guy in the back that kind of leaned on and said, "It's nice that you're like women and know this stuff, right?" And we were, in the same we were in the same field. We had gotten through the same filters. We were there for the same reason. We were on the same page in the admission kind of like board. So like, I mean, it kind of like flabbergasted us a bit. We're like, what? But in itself, as you said, the stepping stones were there. So we had professors who were like very dedicated to the cause, and you didn't feel left out, because it wasn't like one girl against a bunch of dudes. It was very much you saw movement and you saw diversity. A work setting the industry was quite different when I first stepped into it. So the first kind of like jobs I had were in programming, and there you could immediately see the difference, right? It was, maybe you had another girl around, maybe not, it depended. Generally speaking, I was very lucky to be in environments that were raised in places where you did not judge people from their gender. I think most of my coworkers had very strong, female figures in their lives who are actually people you should look up to because of how much they've done and achieved and everything. Or they were just, I would say they were just raised right, because they would never, my core team that I've had before, and especially one that I have now, they would kind of never judge you based on anything outside looking. Usually the kind of like, I would honestly say hierarchy, but mostly like the respect level. So would usually be, okay, how much do you know? How much can I learn from you?
Yeah.
Can you take my feedback as well? Can we work together? And that really settled down well. But of course there were issues as we kind of like grew, and we had to intake more people who maybe hadn't gone through the same filters as the, let's call them, the original team. And so I've heard some really interesting things from people with interesting views, let's call it that, who had issues with having a woman as a team lead, especially
Okay.
Who initially did. It was really interesting to see kind of their thought process, because at first it was some sort of like a denial phase, some sort of like, I can step by you and like just talk to somebody who's above you, who maybe, like, best case for me is like a man, that
Yeah.
that would be the way they would think. And then once they would be called on that, they would do this other approach of trying to be overly friendly, creepily friendly, and then when that didn't work, they would go above and beyond to undermine decisions, basically call you out in meetings, in any sort of setting. And there were, of course, that, I still had it was still one person against a really well established team, so those things didn't go unnoticed. And I was very happy that in those situations it wasn't a she said he said type of scenario, but it was a,
Because they're always difficult, aren't they?
yeah, yeah. Especially if you have like HR included, and then kind of, you have to be like, yeah, but what is going on? And then having a pretty nice fallback, having your team be like, yeah, this is weird for us as well, was quite a setup. And I want to call it a game they played, was quote the sexist things that were said, and we would. Yeah, I mean, eventually, of course, there was action taken towards the person, and then everybody was happy again and all of that. But the whole point of the team was like, okay, if something happens, we spin it around,
Yeah.
we learn from it, we try to make it easygoing for all of us, and then they came up with this list of absurd, ridiculous things said by this person, and then we could just kind of like throw it as a joke every now and then, be like, yeah,
What do you
now.
think's the most ridiculous thing they said?
Well, so my apps, so there's, in terms of it just being delusional, my absolute favorite is, I'm surprised for the good after I met you, because I always thought women only use about 80% of their brain. Is my top top of the list. Yeah, it was interesting. You can't really react to that, right? You just look at it and you go like, okay, bro, and then you kind of get on with your day. The most disgusting one, I would say, or ignorant, would be after a very kind of like bad performance and behavior in the office, which impacted other people as well. Normally we would kind of have a one-on-one into which you kind of sat down and were like, okay, can you tell me what happened and what led to that? And I guess emotional accountability wasn't on the table, because the reply that I got was, you know what, I think you might be on your period, so I'm just not going to discuss this further. Yeah, that was an HR incident.
No.
So yeah. It was, and then you tell these things to the normal part of the team, right? And they're just like, what? And there's no more reaction than what that you can give to that, right? So it was interesting. I definitely learned a lot from that time.
Yeah.
Of course, their strongest arm was trying to elicit any sort of emotion from you, so that they could be like, oh,
she's emotional.
Yeah, exactly.
Why is that always the thing with women? Oh, you're just too emotional.
That is exactly what I heard, right?
You're too emotional.
Yeah.
Oh, I can see that you're taking this too emotionally.
Exactly.
I think it's a good thing. I think we bring it to the table. We bring some empathy.
Exactly.
We're a bit human. It was I went to an event probably a year ago, and they did a report on universities and how their biggest problem when they go under attack is that the universities don't talk to each other. Whereas if one university raised the flag and let another one know, they probably could mitigate risk much quicker and could help more in a pact. And I said to the lady, I was like, oh, I'm really, really interested. And she was like, why? And I was like, well, how many of the universities are run by men? And she was like, why do you ask? And I was like, well, I don't know any woman when something goes terribly wrong, does not ring her best mate or another mate and get advice. Because I know if my kids have messed up or I've burnt something or I've upset them, the first thing I do is ring my best mate and be like, did this happen to you? How did you do it? How did you resolve it? How can I? And she was like, well, interestingly, 90% of the people that did the research paper were men. And I was like, I think that says something, because I think women are open to being vulnerable. I think we are open to saying, oh, I messed up, where there is sometimes that's missed, maybe in a male, not all men, I can't put all men into the same box, but could be missed on, because we are, I don't know, tapped into our emotions.
Yep, exactly. I mean, I completely agree with that, because I think in that setting, my strongest point was exactly as you said, the empathy that I showed towards team members, because our team was a very, very safe space. I mean, if somebody was not having a nice mental health day, they could just like ring you up and be like, hey, I really don't feel like it today. And there were no following questions after that. And it was always like a very, it was, you did not feel judged by any, you could say that you're having a bad day or you're feeling low or this and that. And there was nothing else except empathy shown back to you. And so, that kind of immediate change that was shown with this completely other, and I want to specify that in terms of like, let's call it political views in like overall aspects, we were very different. So we strongly stood in some topics and we had pretty intense debates on all of them, but none led to anything that could be taken as offensive. It was, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, this is your opinion, we can still talk about it. And then you kind of like being confronted with that kind of mindset that, was very, I'm alpha and, this is how you do it, was quite new to everybody. It was definitely challenging. But as I said, it was a really nice team, and they had a way to make everything humorous. So, when everything was sorted out, it was a bit of a, can you believe that happened situation.
And you've obviously done very well in your career. Have your mentors or the people above you been female? Have they been men? Is it just been having the right person above you to support you and it hasn't mattered gender-wise?
So overall, I mean, cybersecurity is a very small pool of people, and actually every kind of mentor I've had so far has been a man. But as I said, all of these guys were people who really had a very strong female role model in their life. So to them, the idea of you trust people based on skill was instilled. But I was very, very lucky to work with some amazing women who, to this day, I look up to, and who kind of just like amaze me with how in depth they get into like every concept and how passionate they were on all of those stuff. Especially in like the first cybersecurity job that I have, there was a girl who I'm going to name drop called Shegalika because she's just awesome. She's studying in Switzerland right now. And when I initially started, I had some training, right? But training and real life do not match by
no.
any degree, right? So I would just like, of course, I felt more comfortable asking her. And she was just this amazing, well-put young woman who just seemed like she had everything in control. I was like, hey, do you mind just like helping me answer this question? She's like, no, we're going to have a full study session. And then she would like take me aside for 1 hour and just go through everything. And I was like, I don't want to take
all your time.
Up your time, right? You're working. She's like, if I ever find out that you need something you didn't ask me, I'm actually going to be mad about it. And then she would just like, absolutely go through everything. And I still, to this day, use those concepts in my work. So I'm really, really grateful to her. And, and as I said, there were quite a few girls around. So, when we had projects or we had to do work, it was very common to be like, hey, it seems like this, how about you take a bit more on this, and then the next subject, that's something I actually like, and I can take more about on that as well. So having them around has definitely shaped me in my career.
Amazing. And it's so lovely that you can remember someone that made decision that day to be kind and helpful, and it's had an impact, and that's had a wave and an impact on how you mentor and how you look after your team. That's a lovely message. Julia, could you do you want to tell us about your history? Obviously, you've got the whole other powering women into the business, but how did you get there? And then maybe kind of your take on why we should be getting more women. I mean, I have my opinion. I think my thing is empathy on one side of things, but why are you so for bringing more women into the industry? And also, what do you think is the business case study for it? If there's someone sat there going, well, I've got a full male team, it's operating fine, why mix it up? What would you say is actually the business case for it as well? So a bit about you and your career and your mentors, and then also if you could tell us why we're sat here today and why it's such an important reason to diversify.
Yeah, absolutely. So while hearing your stories, first of all, I realized once more that how important it is while raising awareness to all the women that there's a field that you could join and be professional in cybersecurity, how important it is to as well educate all the men who are part of this field already, because it doesn't come just with one side. So you can be a great professional, an expert in the field, but if you don't have the support of the people who most likely you're going to end up working with, which the majority of them are men, then it's going to be pointless because you will be working in a toxic environment. If I speak from a perspective, I have a quite similar situation with Eza. So my educational background was very smooth. I never encountered any issue with being a woman and studying in this field, or being perceptive as someone who doesn't have good technical background. But once I stepped into the world of working, especially working in a rough environment, because I work directly with servers and core banking systems, and it was a very technical area of technology. I've been in very, very toxic environments, and the majority of the jobs that I worked and the teams that I've been part of were always men. Maybe to emphasize one of the points that really bothered me the most was the fact that I like to maintain my feminine era. Like I like to be a little bit more feminine, but also be on the technical field quite good. And this was something that men really could not accept.
You can't look great and have a brain, right? Cool, got it.
Yeah, that was, and it was very interesting because every team that I've been into, they always had this idea, and I had to work triple hard, and just to kind of prove to them that I'm technically capable of that. And I did that especially during my first year of career. And at this point right now, I don't really try to do that at all. So it has changed, but it has helped me to grow, but it was toxic in the beginning because it was not a welcoming environment at all.
Sorry, I was just going to ask a question on that. Did you at any point feel like you had to dumb down who you were? Were you like, oh, well, if I don't put as much makeup on, or if I just scrape my hair back and I change my clothes a bit, they're going to accept me? Or were you like, no, this is me, this is how I come? Like, what was your reaction to that? Did you try and fit in, or did you just stand to your beliefs?
So in the beginning, as I said, I was young to the field. I didn't know exactly what to expect. I thought that everyone is going to be supportive, like during my education. And in the beginning, I thought that maybe I have to step back, but luckily I didn't do that. And to be completely honest, this has helped me also to create the entire idea of supporting women in cybersecurity and creating Women for Cyber, because I know that we have a lot of challenges and there are a lot of misconceptions about us. And especially if you're working into the technical field, you can dress up however you want. You can do as much makeup as you want. You can have as longer hair as you want and still be just as technically good, or maybe even better than the guy that's working next to you. This is actually where the idea for Women for Cyber started. Once I encountered all of these challenges, I realized that we need to have more women speaking out about this issue. We already have initiatives about women in technology, but not specifically about women in cybersecurity. I went through the internet and I started to find communities where a lot of women were supporting each other to join the field of cybersecurity, or if they were, let's call them sexually harassed, maybe it's a big term, but in the environment where they're working, then they could go there and discuss what is okay and what is not okay, because a lot of things were not even defined by HR. And sometimes the lines are crossed And even if you say these things to the HR, they will not accept them and they will not see them as something is wrong. For example, an instance I had, yeah.
No, I was going to say that. What is an example of something that we would, as women, feel very, wrong done by us, but HR would be a bit like, is it a problem? What would be an example of that?
Yeah, so I was actually, I have two examples. One of them is while I'm working in one of the teams. I prefer to have longer hair. That's my personal preference. But apparently, one of the guys in our team, it bothered him that I have long hair. And he constantly joked, or maybe didn't even joke about it, and told me that girls who have long hair have a shorter brain. And for me, that's something that I should automatically report to the HR. Of course, um, that's very wrong and cannot be said in a professional environment. And once I said that, it was actually perceived as a joke and nobody did a thing about it. And that's when I realized that I need a stronger and supportive system and building communities where we can support each other, because sometimes these policies within a company tends to fail us, unfortunately. And the other point, I was having an interview for a very important position in cybersecurity when I got asked if I'm married, if I have children, and if I'm planning to have children or something like that. Because she was measuring, like it was a woman who was interviewing me, and she was measuring my capabilities, technical capabilities, whether I have like family or if I'm occupied in a personal level. And to me, that didn't make any kind of sense. If it would be okay if it was a policy within the company, like HR would be asking me that question, but it was a fellow teammate who would be working with me. And why is that relevant to someone who's working on the same team? But yeah, as a sum of all of these things and all of these personal experiences made me realize that we need to be vocal and we need to have stronger communities to raise awareness to all the women who want to join the field, but at the same time educate the men who are already on the field. Because right now, especially the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of women joining the field, and we want to create a supportive system and a supportive background for each one of them. And emphasizing the field of cybersecurity, especially the technical aspect of that, we try to be the voice of all the women and try to represent them in the best way possible, and to simply, as I said, just have a supportive background and supportive community where they can go and rant about anything that they want, and maybe even provide solutions if there's parts of their company where they're failing and they're not supporting them within the teams they're working.
I think you mentioned bringing up that people are asking whether you're going to have children or looking to get married. I think you get checked if you've got an engagement ring on your finger because people make assumptions of what your journey is going to be. I don't know. I mean, I've had 2 children. I've stayed in my job the whole time. I still work full time. I know people have different opinions of that. I actually think it makes me a better mum. I also think I get a lot done with my day. Like I have very clear boundaries of what I want to spend with my children, but I have to get my job done. So I don't know. I think where we're talking about what's the business case of why you should bring women into the industry, and I know people see women having children or offer maternity leave is a red flag, but I think being a mum has taught me so much, and also how important working for me is. Like, it's part of my identity. To remove that from me kills 50% of who I am. So I think, yeah, stopping people accelerating in the career because they might have children, that's horrific. Like, I did the same training, the same education as all my male counterparts. And I think, I'm not sure if it's the same way you guys are, but in the UK, if a male has a child, generally they get a promotion and their pay increases 20 to 30%. Where if a woman, they come back, they lose their pay and it drops. And it's like,
Wow.
what? Like, why? Because I grew the baby? Like, that's mad. Like, if anything, you should be giving me more money.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like a real clear, and women have to, at the moment, unless they're, I'm very fortunate, my husband's very supportive. Most women have to step back their career, can't go up. Or, or if it's in cybersecurity, that's evolving, isn't it? So fast. So if you're not supporting the women on the maternity leave, they're going to come back a year later and be like, but I was just wondering from, your perspective of what do you as women bring to the table that if we removed women from the industry, what do you both think would be lost?
Yeah, well, I think having a diverse team has definitely a lot of positive aspects. And I think that women often approach the problem solving and risk management differently, for example. And one of the points that I would like to emphasize is that we are quite persistent. And being persistent in the field of cybersecurity is one of the key factors, which I think we as women bring to the table. And if you take that from a team, then the team is not going to be as successful, maybe. Apart from that, you mentioned earlier that we have this empathy, and sometimes I like to refer that we also have a fifth sense, and we kind of notice some of the details that maybe some of the men cannot. So on and all, if you have a team where you have different perspective, you have different backgrounds, you have different experiences and knowledge, then I think that will just contribute positively in achieving the success of the entire team. And yeah, I don't know if there's, I've seen teams where there's mainly male dominated or all of them are men. And sometimes I think that bringing a woman to the table will kind of just move that or not make the environment as safe as that it is with the men. But I came to notice, especially the last team that I joined, I'm the only woman right now. It completely changed the perspective. We have outperform actually from last year, and it's been incredible. I think also to emphasize that we are very good at communicating, and communication as part of every other team is very important, because if you don't speak up about the issues that you have either internally or things that are work related, then it's going to be a challenge on itself. And having all of these within a team, in the end, it's just going to do something productive and something positive that we can bring onto the table. And yeah, if you ask all the managers today, they will tell you that the teams that actually have women in them, especially the technical teams, they will outperform compared to all the other teams. And this is just a stated fact, especially within large scale companies, that it's always working out. And we're trying to emphasize that even more day by day.
And it's because we approach things differently. Like you said, we come at a completely different angle. And that's why diversity works not just in gender, but in backgrounds, even religions, even family experiences, different countries, how you guys may perceive a risk or something may be very different to just because of our education and things that we see different. As well, you've led and you are a woman that leads teams as well. What do you see the difference when if there's a more male dominated, and what do you feel like the women in your team bring to the party?
But first, I want to kind of just like carry on a topic that you mentioned about, kind of having kids. To me, if you show that you're capable of raising, one or two babies that absolutely know nothing about life, and you manage to like,
I didn't break them.
Yeah, exactly. Like if have you dealt with the child, like their work? If you, and I don't.
Yeah.
I have a colleague who actually says, who's a young dad, who actually says, "I come to work to have a rest because of how much there's to do with the kid at work." And it's like if that guy can manage to do work and handle with all of that stress, and I'm trusting him with a lot of decisions because with
Oh, and on minimal sleep. Like
and
minimal sleep, you have minimal sleep, you don't eat properly. Sometimes you haven't, I mean, talking about looking good, your hair's not done and you've not showered, and you still can make decisions of life or death or whether that baby's surviving. I agree with you. But yeah, like I think, and men and women of coming in after work when you have not slept, or that baby is screaming at you and you cannot find the resolution. But also I do know that parents they will do anything to find the problem to resolve, to make sure that baby's happy. They'll do anything. So I think if someone can put that all into their job as much as they can to their children and vice versa, it's a great blend.
And I mean, it's just the sleeping part. Like I had to not sleep properly because I had like my thesis deadline the last couple of weeks, and it really messed up with my sleeping schedule. And I'm going to work, and I'm like, I'm not feeling that well because I have like 3-4 hours sleep the whole week. And all the young parents were like, I've been having that for the past year, and I'm like, how do you still operate? How is this working? So yeah, I mean, it's still amazing to me that she's like, oh, you have kids, you're going to be occupied. No, it's, that
It's a
it, and
superpower.
but exactly, it is a superpower. And either way, it is kind of like pointed out there that effectively you're going to work 4 hours a day either way. And if for anybody moving away from screams and cries for half an hour, I think would be quite a blessing. I think it's easier to manage like somebody who's like a full adult sometimes than somebody who just like, irrationally makes a request like 2 a.m.
I think when the worst part is when they can't communicate or say words, they're just screaming at
Exactly.
you, and you're like,
Yeah.
how do I
What do you want?
resolve
What
the
do you want?
scream? I don't know. Don't know what you want from me.
Funny thing is that you've got screaming people even at work environments. So imagine having also a baby and screaming other team member or a manager, then I don't know. It would become too much, I guess.
Other things you think that women bring that we haven't maybe thought of? Like we talk about emotions, empathy. Is there anything else that if you're trying to diversify your team,
Uh,
why considering women into the team might be a good
yeah.
thing to do?
Yeah. So I very much agree with everything Danusha said because one thing you'll notice when you join an all guys team is there's by default a lot of locker room talk, which
Okay.
is just there, and it is there. It's like it just happens. And the thing is, the more closely spaced, so the more time they spend without having girls in their settings, it's just going to get worse and like heavier to kind of like deal with.
Mm.
And the second that a girl is brought in, they do take a step back and they're like, okay, should I say this? Is this something that should be said out loud? And there are going to be cases where they're against their better judgment and they still say something very inappropriate, and you're like, okay, right, fine, but it was supposed to be funny, but are you sure? If you say it again, do you think it will make sense? And I just think have incorporating women in any team, but especially in those teams, kind of really brings just a better sense of, I want to call it enlightenment, education, self-perceivement, because they enable each other to say the most ridiculous things. Really, it's quite amazing what you can hear in those settings. And then when you kind of put a blockage and you're like, look, I will tolerate this, but it would be very, very uncomfortable for whoever else that joined. It's a girl, and also I don't want you to. I work with my brother. My brother is also in cybersecurity, and I absolutely did not want him to hear those kind of things. We've raised him a feminist, right? So, and I'm very proud of like, how he is and how he acts and everything. And then, randomly hearing some very derogatory memes and stuff,
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, this is not happening. In terms of technical skills, well, in my team, we pretty much all started at the same pace. Right, so and it was very much a skill based evaluation, and I managed to get where I am, of course, because everybody was communicative and was like talking to each other and all of that. But in the end, some skills were evaluated, and it was decided that I would take on the team lead role for the team that I had, and that was not a decision that was questioned by my fellow team members. So I want to say that I agree with Danusha and with you in terms of this element of emotionally trying to understand why somebody is like acting the way they act in at work or why they
Mm.
didn't perform well, kind of sets you apart in terms of management, because that's not an approach that was employed before. It was, this is the deadline, why is it not the deadline here? And whereas these kind of we took a bit of a different situation, so the different kind of perspective to it, and we're like, okay, this is our project. We're going to chunk it out. Everybody takes the chunks that they feel more comfortable with it, and if something comes along the way, you come back to me, you come back to somebody else. We work on it. If you want to drop it, of course, you give me an excuse. You tell me why, but then we figure it out. And I think this whole thing of whatever kind of emotions you're showing, we're going to make it work. Um, was what set our team apart. And in comparison to other departments, we did establish our grounds pretty quickly. And yeah, so definitely think that in terms of management and problem solving, that's something quite new, I would say, as opposed to a bit more traditional management. And it's just the want to know more in the settings that in school as well. As I said, women have been a bit more like reliable and persistent and more organized in their studies. And that's the same thing that I've seen with the example of the of Shega that I mentioned. Her way of studying wasn't I need to learn this to do this. It was like I need to learn why this works so then I can use it in different fields. And then the way she would incorporate elements and she would bring everything together was very unique. So I think bringing everything down to core elements and then finding ways to bring them together, something that really I've seen mainly in my female colleagues.
Okay. So obviously we can see the benefits and the business cases of why we should bring more women, but we are aware there is a gap and the women aren't necessarily joining cybersecurity or even technical roles. What do you think we can do to close that gap? Is there initiatives? I mean, I know there's programs and things like that, but what ways do you think we can do more to encourage women to join the industry?
Yeah, actually, this is the field that I'm currently working on. So I'm well aware of all the challenges and difficulties that come with it. To start, I think one of the things that we're doing great is that we have started initiatives like different organizations. As I mentioned, Women for Cyber is one of them. And we are trying to find what the core problem is. And we have two issues here. First one is that we do not have role models enough. Even if you watch a movie, for example, when I was little, I watched a movie, the person behind a computer or the hacker, as they refer to, was always a man. So indirectly, I was being told as a child that this is not a field of women. This is a field for men only. And we need to change that. We need to promote a lot of role models. We have incredible women who are working in the field of cybersecurity. We have incredible pen testers. We have incredible cybersecurity experts. We only need to show them a little bit more. And we need to emphasize the importance and the inclusion of women in cybersecurity. To explain this a little bit better, what we're doing to tackle this issue is going, for example, in schools, in primary schools, and we are gamifying cybersecurity. We are showing little boys and little girls that there's a field called cybersecurity. It's the defenders of the digital world. And we are playing games with them, but in the same time, we are making sure that the person who is playing those cybersecurity games with them is a woman. So indirectly, we are showcasing that a woman can also be incredibly successful and can be technically advanced in this field. And you as a little girl can be inspired, and maybe when you grow up, you can join this field as well. So we're making it interesting, but at the same time inspiring for all the little girls who perhaps in the future might be interested in technology or in the cybersecurity field itself. And then the other point is that we don't have enough engagement, enough networking events for the women. And this is especially a program that we're working together with Women for Cyber. We also have developed something called mentorship program, which at the same time not only mentors all the girls despite their backgrounds. You could come from law, you could come from economy, whatever background you want. If you are up for changing a field or changing what you want to do in the future, then we are giving you this opportunity by connecting you with professional mentors. So you can have a one-on-one session with a mentee and kind of just define what kind of field of cybersecurity they could go into. Cybersecurity is a huge field and you have different domains within it. So if you think that you could be better technically in this aspect, then you have very nice technical fields where you could develop yourself into. If you think that maybe you're not as good technically, then you have other non-technical fields, but which fall within the cybersecurity world. And we're trying to do this, not only Women for Cyber. I've seen also many other organizations which are doing this out of free will. For all the countries all over the world. And we are seeing an impact. Although it's very slow, we are seeing the changes. But to sum it up, I think that if we continue in the same way, we do a lot of mentoring, we do a lot of events, networking events, which emphasize only the women participation, and we showcase all of these successful women, and we give the spotlight to them. I think we will do a great positive impact in the field, and we can only do this also with the support of men, because I like to say that this is quite important, considering that right now the majority of the people who are working in cybersecurity is men, so it's a male dominated field. Maybe in this context the technology itself, like IT overall, has changed with a lot of initiatives, because we used to have a more male dominated field, but right now it's kind of the women also populated that area. But in cybersecurity we have a huge gender gap, maybe because the field itself is also growing. Every new technology that it's becoming, then you also have the aspect of security on it. Maybe that's affecting also the number, which is not increasing. But continuing with the initiatives, with the support, with women supporting each other, with men supporting women, and with mentoring programs, with other activities, then I think we will succeed and we will achieve where we want to be. Another point is also sometimes the work that women are doing is not being appreciated. That's why there's a lot of events recently, awards for women, which are kind of spotlighting them and thanking them for all the great job and work that they're doing in cybersecurity. And I think it's important to also create more awards to thank them for all the great job that they're doing, but at the same time they will also be more motivated to give back to the community. And I think the part of giving back to community plays a crucial role to increasing and closing the gender gap in cybersecurity.
Elsa, do you have anything to add of why you think, obviously, there's just living this day in, day out, but why would you think, what could we do to encourage more people to join us?
Well, at first, I want to point out, so Danusha's work, because I've seen it, especially in Kosovo. She one time got so while I was working at that company, she brought a group of young girls, and then we basically explained everything we do to them. And normally, when you have these kind of groups, I say out of 20, you have one or two people reach out to you and like be interested in what you're doing. But that number was definitely higher that time. So it was, they were eager, but also I guess they also like felt safe and felt like they could reach out and ask questions. So I know it kind of like looks like it's slow, but actually I was quite impressed with how many people reached back. And so the kind of work that I did there was there was a lot of education working. We had to have classes, because there's just so little when it comes to picking cybersecurity professionals, especially in some very niche fields. So we had to train people, and I think every company has to train cybersecurity newcomers, regardless of how much experience they've had, just because of how different and versatile the field is. And yeah, it was like in the beginning, it usually would be like in 10 people, we'd have one or two girls, and that's slowly, increasing. And I think there's really only one key factor that changes everything. If you talk to somebody who's into cybersecurity, they will make you like cybersecurity, because this is a field where you need to be very self-motivated, because again, there's not much established. If you want to do computer programming, you have classes and courses and whatever you want to call, coding dojos, whatever. There's programs, university programs. There's a lot of people that you can reach out to. Whereas cybersecurity is just now seeing universities come up with programs, is just now seeing, certifications being put to the front. And honestly, I saw it first, and then I just liked it. And I think that is the quickest thing we can do. And I was also in one of the meetups of Women for Cyber in Vienna, when they were celebrating some sort of anniversary or whatever they had. And just this lady randomly approached me and my friends and was like, "Hey, what do you do?" And I said, "Yeah, we're students and we're doing our master's." She's like, "Oh, okay. You can apply to this conference, which is just women in science. which is a huge conference that happens twice a year in Europe and somewhere in America, either north or south. And then you could submit your work, and they're going to call you. They're going to give you a little booth, and it's just like hundreds of women there who have different backgrounds that are going to come and talk to you. And she didn't have to do it. She just approached us and was like, "I'm going to talk to you. You seem like you just kind of like broke into this field. Here's something that can get you started, and I'm going to do that." Because it's a nice opportunity that I saw in a really nice and comfortable event with that was all women, and on top of that, I think what what the University of Pristina did, especially Technical University, is a very good example into something that I like to call short-term solutions for long-term effect. So it was a couple of years where they were like, we're going to put a quota if 60% of the places in computer engineering are men, we're by default going to intake women, and it is what it is. And if you stop and look at it in terms of, okay, is that fair? A lot of people are going to be like, no, because the guys worked so hard, and if it's not fair. But there were solutions. They could still apply for computer science, which was just another degree with kind of like the same program. It had the same accreditation, everything. Or they could just apply for another technical branch and then just swap. They would still take them. It was just the idea that, hey, we're making room for you, come and join, was very welcome. And it was very like, even if I don't make it, I'll try. And there's this really good research that shows that if men fulfill 60% of the criteria for a job place, they will apply, but women will only apply if they reach 100%. And so, if you just created the incentive for them to be like, even if I don't make it, I'm still going to apply. And nowadays, it's equal by default. The number is equally filled by default. And I think that is a huge achievement.
Massive.
And yeah, exactly. And it's that, and it's just talking to people. Danusha's initiative has a lot of really good mentors because I've gone through all of them. And those are people that actually go to talk whenever I just need anything, when I need an evaluation of my salary, when I need to check if something that happened to me at work is normal, when I need to I have a question about work and I know where to ask. A lot of the people who she's listed as their mentors are really well-established figures. And I think ultimately it just has to be talking. And that's about it.
And being there for each other. What do you both predict for the future of cybersecurity? And where do you think it's going to go? Danusha, do you have any thoughts?
Maybe in which context, if we're talking about women inclusion, or if we're talking about just the field of cybersecurity itself?
Let's say both. Where do you think, as in an industry, where do you think it's going to go? And where do you think we will get more women in, or do you think this is going to be a continuous battle?
Definitely a continuous battle. But I think we will have definitely a positive impact. As Eza stated, we have all of these little things that we're doing, like the meetups showcasing women, increasing the number of participants in universities to be more women. All of these will gradually help. But it will be a continuous battle because, as I stated, cybersecurity is evolving so fast, and every new technology that is coming in hand, for example, let's take right now the artificial intelligence, it also comes with the security part, which means automatically cybersecurity is growing massively. And with that will grow the gender gap as well. I think there will be a lot of new challenges in cybersecurity itself as a field. But it's fun, especially for people who are or who want to be updated all the time and who like to get information and be updated with the newest vulnerabilities and attacks and everything that is going all over the world. But I would like to remain positive and optimistic that the future of cybersecurity is in safe hands. And I really hope that in the future, the number of women participation will grow at least to 50%, because right now, based on the studies made, it's just 20%, which is very, very low. But let's see. We will keep working with all of the organization, with all incredible women like Eza herself. And I believe that we will make a great impact. I'm quite confident in that.
Also, what do you think is going to be the future?
Well, in terms of participating, I think it's going to be kind of similar to what happened with just computer programming in general. It was initially very male dominated, and then these initiatives took place, and then it just became more inviting. And technology in itself, for me, it's a field that gives you an opportunity to quickly switch to something else. It just doesn't have the backlog that every other science does in terms of you needing to do years and years of research. In just like a couple of months make a lot of difference. And so I think the path is kind of going to be similar. We're already seeing an increase of women. As Rusha said, it is low, but you have to start somewhere. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's going to be kind of like that same path. And there's numbers and numbers and reports of how much cybersecurity is being needed and how much of a shortage there is, and that's really being reflected on the companies with with them employing this idea that, okay, I can go and look for individuals that are experienced, but like there's so few, so I'm just going to train people. So, and with everything just being digitalized, I think this approach will just be kind of adopted by everybody else. I think there's going to be more and more places and more focus on cybersecurity, and I think that makes it perfect for us to right now start, because we're either way just trying to have everybody direct their focus in cybersecurity. So might as well start right and make sure that all genders are being included, and kind of have it done right from the beginning.
Yeah, start from the foundations up right from the start. That makes sense. Ladies, if anyone wanted to connect with you guys, or obviously learn about your causes and things that where's the right ways to connect with you and reach out?
So I'll be the first. So I'm on LinkedIn personally. I'm quite active there, especially on the topic of women inclusion. And also, maybe if somebody wants to be part of women's communities in cybersecurity, they can always reach out to Women for Cyber Foundation, or specifically the Women for Cyber Kosovo chapter. It would be great to connect with everybody, and I'm very open to discuss ideas and possibilities, how we can increase and how we can support more women in the field of cybersecurity. But definitely, if you just type out my name and last name on the internet, I will show up, and it would be a great pleasure to connect with anybody who wants to be in touch. And we can have great discussion, whether if it's about women inclusion or cybersecurity as a field itself.
Perfect, thank you.
So Danusha is a bit more public facing. I would say it would be easier to find her. I am on LinkedIn as well. So it turns out there's quite a few people that share my first name and last name.
But
just go with, I don't think there's anybody doing cybersecurity. So I think that's going to be the takeaway. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you both so much for taking up an hour of your time today to speak about a topic I find really important, and I know that you both too. So thank you so much, and hopefully we can do it again soon. And it'd be lovely to meet you in person, hopefully one day. That would be lovely.
That would be really lovely as well, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
With you and sharing experiences.
Yeah, it was same for me. Thank you very much for making the time, and I hope we will make a global impact together in cybersecurity.
Definitely. All three of us take on the world.
Yes, definitely. Small steps.
What another great episode, and two incredible and inspiring ladies joining us on the podcast. Obviously have done incredibly well in their career and shining on a light of why we are really raising that flag and trying to get more diversity into the industry, not just for women, really anyone that's got something different to bring to the table will really make sure that this industry just goes from strength to strength. So thank you for joining us on our journey into this world of diversity and women in cybersecurity. As we continue to navigate the ever-evolving landscape of digital security, let's remember that our strength lies in our differences. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, and we'll catch up on the next episode of The Core. Please reach out, and if you have a story to share or you think there's someone we should be talking to, please do let us know. Once again, thanks so much for joining us, and I'll speak to you soon.